of our country. The VA, as I said earlier, was just a mess under the Obama-Biden administration.
How many police officers need to be assaulted in the streets of Portland by radical left mobs in order for Joe Biden to condemn this?
I don't understand how we have leaders who think that it's okay to tell us as parents that our kids can go and get an abortion without our consent, yet we have no right to keep them home from school. It's just, it's completely hypocritical.
Can't believe that he's calling these folks peaceful protesters.
Well, I think Joe Biden is totally on the wrong page on this, and he's completely out of step with where American women are when they talk about how to protect their families.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Team Trump Online. I'm Lara Trump, Senior Advisor to President Trump's re-election campaign. Tonight, we have the absolute pleasure of welcoming Deputy Campaign Manager to President Trump's re-election campaign, Justin Clark. Justin, great to get you on the show. Thanks for being with us. So we're now just over 90 days out from Election Day. We know that this is officially crunch time. So Justin, can you give an update on the state of the race to the millions of proud Trump supporters watching at home?
Sure. Well, Lara, we are feeling really good about where we are. You look at the president's numbers in the polls and the public polls, and there are a lot of problems with them. But what we are seeing are trends that are going in a really positive direction. The president's numbers in the Rasmussen poll, which some people have described as a real kind of gut check because it comes out every day, shows his fave on fave at 51 over 47 right now, which is a really strong number given where we've been, given the global pandemic, given the economic crisis that resulted from it. The president's numbers are holding up really, really well. The president is engaged in campaigning and winning this election. And we have all the tools we need to win, and we're really primed and ready to go. So we feel like we are on the precipice of jumping into the fall campaign right after the conventions and really winning the bad dash to Election Day in November. So we feel great about where we are.
Yeah, and I always think about 2016 and really, Justin, how different things are now in 2020 than 2016. It's Brad Parscale that always talks about our campaign, and I always find his analogy to be so spot on. He talks about our campaign in 2016 being like an airplane flying through the air and being built literally as it was flying. Some days we didn't have pilots, some days we didn't have wings, but at the last second we got the landing gear down, landed the plane, and Donald Trump won the election. So now in 2020, we're light years ahead of where we were in 2016. In fact, we really have some historic ground game efforts underway. I want to give you a chance to talk about that and how important that really will be as we head into the fall and as we head towards Election Day.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned Brad, and he put together a campaign here that is a well-oiled machine. We are a great operation, a lot of camaraderie, and you said it. I was there in 2016 too, and we were, it was a lot of work and a lot of fun, but we were kind of doing things on the fly quite a bit.
I say we're very grassroots, Justin. I use that term a lot.
That's right. But speaking of grassroots, one of the things you're talking to someone who comes from a background in field and political, and the field organization and the grassroots organization that this campaign has built and the Republican Party has built over the last 4 years is unbelievable. We have the number of paid activists or paid operatives and activists that we've recruited in all of the battleground states and more have allowed the president to expand the map, to play in places, go on offense in places where we were not in 2016, like in Minnesota, like in states like New Mexico. We are on the ground fighting day to day. Hundreds of thousands of voter contacts that have already happened and will continue to happen. And based on a neighborhood team leader program, it really allows us to recruit people in their neighborhoods who are then talking to their friends and neighbors. Look at the number of voter registrations alone. Since 2012, the Democrats are down down about 300,000 voter registrations, and the Republicans are up about 100,000 voter registrations. That's a 400,000 registration swing in a swing state like North Carolina. And you and I both know this, and our viewers know this. Pollsters out there, when they do polling, they're basing all of their numbers off of the previous 2 election cycles. And so they're just not capturing a lot of that energy, a lot of that enthusiasm that we are capturing on the ground with our field program. So I'm really excited about it. In a close race, these things make all the difference in the world. And we've turned it into a program where we're able to actually affect that race early on with voter registration, organizing, and neighborhood team leader. So all the credit in the world to this organization to be able to do it, and to Chris Carr and his team at the RNC. But it's going to be a real big factor as we head into the home stretch here, and something the Democrats don't have.
Yeah, well, that's probably, Justin, because literally Joe Biden's putting people to sleep across the country. I don't think there's much enthusiasm out there for him, but I want to give a big shout out to all of our volunteers across the country. They are going to be the ones, as we know, that make the ultimate difference. And I have people every day calling, texting, asking me in a restaurant, wherever I am, how do I volunteer for the Trump campaign? And if you at home want to volunteer, you can go to armyfortrump.com. I mean, it truly is what will get this president across the finish line, having real people across this country reaching out to your neighbors, friends, people at your kids' schools, assuming we get schools back up and running across this country. It's what's going to make the difference. So please volunteer if you can. There's lots of opportunities to do that. But I want to shift, Justin, to a topic that President Trump really has been touching on a lot and discussing. It's been all over the news for very good reason: universal mail-in voting. So for those watching at home that aren't political junkies, maybe, Justin, you can break down the dangers of universal mail-in voting and contrast that with absentee, because I think there's a bit of confusion out there for a lot of people.
Sure, happy to. I mean, just to be really clear and kind of set the parameters of what it is, universal mail-in voting, universal vote by mail, is a process by which the government mails out live ballots to voters everywhere. So there's no request, there's no certification, there's no nothing. It's the government mailing live ballots to a voter file that they've got. That includes active voters, but also inactive voters, people who have been deceased and their name hasn't been scrubbed from the voter file, people who have moved to another state. Lots of people can get ballots that shouldn't get ballots or don't have them. The Wall Street Journal today had an op-ed from somebody who had moved from Washington State to Texas and yet received a mail-in ballot from Washington State after their move. Tons and tons of problems with this, because what you're not doing is you're not having a request from a voter for a ballot and then a return that comes back. You're just mailing them out automatically. Absentee voting, on the other hand, is a process by which an individual, a voter who's qualified to vote, fills out a form, either brings it into their local registrar or board of election or mails it, and then receives a ballot back. Now, what's the difference there? The difference there is that you've got someone with a signature who has a signature on file at the county board of election or at the registrar's office that is then matched. A ballot is sent out that has a security envelope on it, which needs to be signed on the outside. Oftentimes that signature needs to be attested to by another person. It's a process that may seem cumbersome to some, but provides the needed security measures when you're dealing with voting through the mailbox, as opposed to universal vote by mail where there are none. So really, really important. And really important to note that the president is and always has been for absentee voting.
That's right.
You've got a reason where you can't vote on election day, then you can get an absentee vote by requesting it and going through the proper procedures. What he's opposed to is flooding the zone with live ballots to voters that are living or dead, there or not. And that's a real problem.
Yeah, and a couple of things that I just want to say about that. First of all, if anybody wondered out there, well, is it that bad, like this just universal mail-in voting? I'm going to direct everybody to a story about a cat named Cody Timms, who, Justin, had been deceased for 12 years, that got a mail-in ballot. So we're talking about sending them out not just to humans, but to cats as well. And a friend of mine posted something on Instagram, and this sort of like just struck me very, very starkly. And I said, that is a great point. Let's just say you for example, maybe won the lottery. Would you mail that in to collect your money, Justin, or would you maybe want to take it in person to be sure that you got your money at the other end of that? I mean, it's ripe with voter fraud, the mail-in, and I think what you said there at the end is so important, and it warrants repeating. We at the Trump campaign, the president, his administration, 100% are for absentee ballots. So if you were a person across this country, maybe you have an underlying health condition, maybe you don't feel safe going to vote in person on November 3rd, get an absentee ballot. It is absolutely safe. It is the way to go. What the president, again, has always warned against, the universal mail-in voting. There really is a huge difference, and I want to make it very, very clear to people out there. Absentee, yes. Full mail-in voting, just with sending it out into the universe, nobody really knows what happens with it. Absolutely wrong. So I think that warrants repeating. If people want to, Justin, find out more about where they can register to vote, absentee, I believe on our website, right? We can direct them there. Where can they go to find out a little more information?
You bet. If they go to donaldjtrump.com and click on the links, they can get right to it to learn about it. You can also contact your local board of election, your local registrar. A quick Google search will also allow you to know the local rules that you've got where you are. Call into one of our campaign offices. Stop by, ask a canvasser or someone who calls you on the phone from our campaign. Happy to help. The information's everywhere, and we want to get it to you. Important to note that every state's got different rules with respect to how to apply for these.
Yeah.
If you go to our website, you're going to be able to find many different ways to figure out what your local rules are. But it's really, really critical. What you said is absolutely right, Lara. The difference and distinction between absentee voting and universal vote by mail couldn't be clearer. One is a safe and secure method, and the other really is problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to belabor the point, I want to hear directly from President Trump. I want everybody at home to hear this, discussing the nightmare scenario that universal mail-in voting would lead to. Watch this.
Absentee ballots, great. Going to the polls, great. If you do universal mail-ins with millions and millions of ballots, you're never going to know what the real result of an election is.
All right, so Justin, we just heard from the man himself there. How much chaos would universal mail-in voting lead to on election day? And to the president's point, weeks, months afterward, would we ever really get a true picture as to who won the election? What would that look like?
Well, you need look no further than New York's 12th congressional district. In June, they had a primary, and today we're in August already, and they still haven't been able to figure out who won that primary because of an uptick in vote by mail as a result of the COVID primary and changes that Governor Cuomo and the state made to their primary election. That's almost 6 weeks in a low turnout primary in a congressional district, and they still don't know the winner. And quite frankly, you expand that, by multitudes just in that congressional district for the presidential election, and it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
Not only are you not going to have a long time till you know when to win, but because we won't have faith in how those votes were cast, who cast them, whether people's votes were actually cast or not, or whether they were harvested and thrown in the garbage can, people aren't going to have faith in who won the election with universal vote by mail. I find it really interesting that you have a lot of these Democratic governors who want universal vote by mail. They want to radically overhaul the election system. And, 5 short months ago, they couldn't get a vote counting app in the Iowa caucuses to work.
That's right.
It's a joke. It's a total joke. You know what it's going to lead to.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I remember it feels like it was 150 years ago now, Justin, but you're right. The Iowa caucuses, we still don't officially know the results of that, and we're in August now. I mean, it is rather frightening, and I find it interesting. If the Democrats were so sure that Joe Biden was just going to sail to victory, wouldn't they want a decisive win on November 3rd? Why drag it out? Why all the chaos and confusion? Maybe it's because they know that their candidate is absolutely terrible, that nobody's excited about him. They're probably not going to get a high voter turnout for Joe Biden and whoever he picks as his VP running mate. But it's very interesting. I mean, this year is different on a lot of fronts, but 3 months before an election, really, you guys want to change it? It does beg the question, What are the Democrats thinking? It sounds like maybe they're ready to cheat the American people. I don't know. I'm not saying yes or no, but a lot of people think that.
Well, whenever you feel like you're going to be down and you want to make sure that you're going to get a win, sowing chaos, sowing confusion, and throwing the results up in the air lets you make all sorts of claims about what happened and who won and where and when. And if you don't have that kind of certainty, it can just lead to a lot of trouble, as you know, we're talking about.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. All right, Justin, thanks for that commentary. Everybody at home, stay right where you are. We're going to be right back after this.
Joe Biden has embraced the policies of the radical left. Trillions in new taxes, crushing middle-class families.
If you elect me, your taxes are going to be raised, not cut.
Amnesty for 11 million illegal immigrants.
Citizenship for 11 million undocumented folks.
Reducing police funding.
Yes, absolutely.
The radical left has taken over Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. Don't let them take over America.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message. I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Welcome back to Team Trump Online. I'm Lara Trump, and I'm joined by Justin Clark, Deputy Campaign Manager to President Trump's re-election campaign. So, Justin, we're discussing the universal mail-in push by the Democrats. What do you think? Is this an effort to rig the system to get more votes for them? What's the story here?
Well, look, I think the universal vote by mail system is inherently less secure than voting in person, right? With universal vote by mail, you have a lot of things that happen afterwards that otherwise don't if you vote in person. You have things like ballot harvesting, which is paid political operatives roaming around the streets, collecting ballots from people, going into their homes, watching them vote, and then taking those ballots and returning them to the registrar of voters or not, and is a system that is horribly overused by Democrats, okay? But it's a way to collect votes. Imagine an Easter egg hunt where you're going around putting as many votes as you can in your basket and returning them and getting candy at the end. It's a terrible system that disincentivizes people to get more votes or get rid of other votes. It also leads to what are called postmark rules, which is Democrats that try to extend the date of the election, effectively move the election day by allowing ballots that are postmarked or not postmarked by election day coming in after election day. Those are two things that allow paid political operatives to add votes to the pile once the votes on election day are counted. We saw it in 2018 in California. Republicans won on election day, were winning many of those congressional seats that eventually we lost, and then every day, one after another, the vote count got smaller and smaller and smaller until the Democrats won, and then they called it. That's the system they want. That's the system they want nationwide, and that's California. Because if you know how many votes you need on election day, and you have time afterward to get them, you can create a lot of chaos with a universal vote by mail system.
Yeah, well, we know generally how well things work in the state of California, so why wouldn't we want to replicate that all over the country? Something that I want our folks watching at home to think about if you live in a household where perhaps you have kids that are off at school, college-age children, and you receive their ballots and the parents are possibly filling out the ballots for the kids. I mean, this is really there is no system, Justin, by which we can do this in a legitimate fashion. There's so many different ways that I think this can go wrong, as the president has said, as we have talked about here. But I want to talk about the fact that President Trump and his administration are committed to protecting the democratic principles of this country when it comes to election integrity. Can you expand on that and what he's doing and why this is so vital and important to the future of our country?
Sure, I'd love to. I mean, President Trump is the first president I've known in my lifetime who's really called out, what's going on with our voting systems in this country, and really, put it on the line that voting in person is inherently more safe and more secure than voting by mail. Now, again, as the president said, we're all for absentee voting. So is he. It's a system that works. It's a system that these local governments are designed to uphold. But when you flood the zone with ballots, you're trying to do is undermine the results of the election by projecting election results that don't necessarily reflect the will of the people. The American people need to have certainty in the outcome of their election, and universal vote by mail calls that into question. And I think the president has been highlighting that. I think it's important that the president has been highlighting that. And it's about time that somebody did, because if we don't have faith in the outcome of our elections, that they were fair and free and that they reflect the will of the people, then, our representative form of government is at risk.
Yeah, it's really scary stuff. It's interesting, though, because do you remember back in 2016 when the Democrats kept saying, Donald Trump will never accept the results of the election. Yet, who is it, Justin, that still doesn't know that she's not president of the United States? Her name happens to be Hillary Clinton. I'll fill in the blank for everybody. But everything that they do, they suggest this president is doing, they actually themselves do and have done. It's just kind of like, whatever.
You can talk to Hillary Clinton. I'm pretty sure Stacey Abrams is still the imaginary governor of Georgia. Correct. I mean, these people will not accept the results of an election, yet they go around and accuse the president of not doing it. It's bananas.
So now they're trying to rig the system with universal mail-in voting. They don't care that it's right for voter fraud. In fact, that's probably just what they want. In Nevada, Democrats just rammed through mass mail-in voting and ballot harvesting literally in the middle of the night. So if you ever wondered what's going on in Nevada, middle of the night, Democrats are trying to rig the system. Can you discuss the ramifications of this action and what the Trump campaign is doing to fight back? Because I think this is important.
And Lara, this is the most egregious power grab I've ever seen by a government 90 days out from an election. For those of you that don't know, on late Friday evening, the Democrats in the Nevada legislature passed a bill in their House which mandated universal vote by mail, which also keeps the polling places open. So with very limited electronic controls in that state, or not universal electronic controls, so that the risk of double voting is very high. So they're going to mail a live ballot to all active registered voters and keep the polls open. They have rules that allow 2 votes that are in an envelope to be counted. In some instances, believe it or not, two ballots in an envelope can be counted in the vote pile with a simple majority vote of the election workers in the room. They have really greatly expanded and legalized ballot harvesting in a meaningful way. They have extended Election Day by allowing ballots with a postmark by Election Day in 7 days after the election, and ballots without a postmark on it, meaning we don't know when they were sent, allowed 3 days after the election. This is a total power grab. The Democrats are very nervous in Nevada, and so that's why they're trying to rig this election by doing this. It's really egregious, and we anticipate the governor is going to sign the bill here shortly, and the Trump campaign is going to respond accordingly, because this is outrageous, and the people of Nevada deserve better.
Oh, they do. The people of Nevada, the people all across this country deserve better. I mean, this is ridiculous. We need to make sure people are going into the casinos instead of doing this nonsense in the middle of the night. Let's get that back up and running, it sounds like, in Las Vegas. But Justin, can you highlight some other really egregious examples of both historic and recent mail-in voting fraud? I mean, you just explained the local race in New York, but what other things can you point to as to really, really egregious and overreaching voter fraud that we've had in our past?
Well, in addition to our favorite voting cat, Cody Timms, there are multiple examples of pets not only receiving ballots and ballot applications, but voting them throughout the years. But you don't need to look past this year to see a lot of problems with universal vote by mail and issues. In Paterson, New Jersey this year, rampant corruption in their election, which was a result of vote by mail. In West Virginia, you had a letter carrier who was involved in filling out party registration forms and ballots for people. In Colorado recently, we had a county board of elections refer an election worker to a district attorney's office. There are just millions of examples of this. I'd point everyone to the Wall Street Journal op-ed page, which I referenced before, where people are receiving ballots after they've moved and forwarded mail. It's not only these examples that are too numerous to count, but just inherently the system. It makes sense that it's just not going to work right when you have so many people touching the ballot and so many people handling a ballot. It's ripe for fraud, and it's really problematic.
Wow, I didn't know that my dogs Charlie and Ben could start voting. I guess I'll see if they get a ballot in the mail. This will be very interesting. I'll report back on that. And Justin, I want to get your final thoughts, but before we do that, we really do need as many people as possible to join our efforts to make America great again this November. And I always like to remind everybody at home how you can get involved. As always, be sure to text Trump to 88022. Download our new Trump 2020 app. You can register for events on the app. It's really, really exciting. Very, very straightforward, very user-friendly. You can become a volunteer, earn exclusive prizes. You want to get the app. It's very, very cool. So, Justin, final thoughts before we end the show. What message would you like to leave with the American people tonight?
All I would say is this. We talked a lot about universal vote by mail and voter fraud. We obviously want people to sign up and help out on Election Day. But the best way to defeat this type of stuff is to get out and beat the Democrats by so much that there's nothing they can steal. So I encourage everybody to get involved, to show up and help out and volunteer, and we'll win this thing in November.
Amen to that. Yeah, if you're worried about Election Day voter fraud, sign up to volunteer. We'll put you to work at polling locations. You can check out, you can be part of our Election Day operation team. You can knock on doors, remind people to send in their absentee ballots. We will put you to work. We want you out there fighting for this president. And November 3rd, that's right, Justin said it. We want to win by the biggest margin in history so that they can't, no matter how many Cody Tims they got, Justin, it won't even matter because we're going to win fair and square. So thanks, Justin, again for joining us tonight. And I want to say thank you to all of our incredible patriots at home for watching. We will see everybody again next time on Team Trump Online.